The waiter took the younger woman's order first. Not rudely. He just did it without thinking. The colleague used her exact phrase in the meeting 20 minutes after she said it. To applause. The doctor, her doctor, the one she'd been seeing for 6 years, explained the diagnosis slowly, in the tone reserved for someone who might not follow. The form asked for an emergency contact. She stared at the line for a while. Her daughter called on Sunday. Talked for 40 minutes about her own life. Asked how she was doing in the last 90 seconds before hanging up. None of these things, separately, would register as an event. Combined over years, they accumulate into something without a clean name but entirely recognizable. The experience of becoming background. Not invisible, exactly. More like ambient. Present but not consulted. There, but not quite counted. She is in her early 50s. She has been competent her entire adult life, professionally, domestically, relationally. She ran a household and probably a career simultaneously for 2 decades, while managing the emotional weather of everyone inside, both. She remembered the appointments and the birthdays and who needed which medication, and who was struggling at work, and who couldn't be seated next to whom at Christmas. She held all of it without keeping score, because she was not raised to keep score. And it was never framed as something requiring acknowledgement. It was just what she did. It was just who she was. And somewhere in the years between 48 and 53, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. She found herself standing in rooms she was holding up, and feeling, quietly, like a stranger in them. Gen X women were born between 1965 and 1980 into a specific historical moment. Second-wave feminism had just changed the rules, or appeared to. Girls were told in school, in the particular energy of the era, that this generation would be the first to have it all: career and family and self. No trade-off required. The message was real, and the women who received it were capable enough to try to live it completely. They also came home to empty houses. About 40% of Gen X were latchkey kids. For girls, the instruction set was slightly more complicated than for boys. Be independent, yes. But also be agreeable. Be capable. And be likable. While doing it. Don't make noise. Figure it out yourself, and don't make it anyone else's problem that you had to. What that produced, in a generation raised to be both self-reliant and relationally responsible, was a very specific adaptation. Psychologist Dana Jack mapped it first in 1991. She called it self-silencing. The pattern of suppressing your own needs to preserve a relationship, of reading every room so thoroughly and so reflexively, that the reading becomes the whole occupation, and you stop noticing you never get read back. The link between self-silencing and depression in women is well established in the research. The mechanism is quiet. The capability becomes a habit. The habit becomes a personality. And eventually, the woman can no longer locate the difference between choosing not to need things and having forgotten she was allowed to. By midlife, many of these women have been responding to everyone else's needs for so long and so automatically that the question, "What do you want?" arrives like something in a foreign language. She hesitates. Then she names what someone else needs. There is a specific way this shows up by the early 50s. The reflexive "I'm fine." The guilt that arrives when she rests. The strange, almost physical difficulty of accepting help. The resentment that surfaces and surprises her. Because she thought she was okay with all of it. She was. She just never had a chance to check. This is the psychological cost of overfunctioning for 20 years, without anyone acknowledging it as cost. She went into the workforce during a moment that kept promising equality, while distributing something more complicated. She worked. She also carried most of the domestic load. OECD data shows women in wealthy countries still bear roughly 4 hours of unpaid household and care work per day, twice what men do. The average family caregiver is a 9-year-old woman who holds down a job while providing 20 hours of unpaid care per week to a parent. Female caregivers spend as much as 50% more time caregiving than men. There was no ledger for any of this. Nobody tracked it. The kitchen cleaned, the appointment kept, the child calmed at 2 a.m. The parent driven to the hospital, all of it absorbed back into the invisible running of everything. She kept everything going. Nobody wrote it down. Here's what I kept running into when I went deep into the research on this, and it surprised me more than I expected. The invisibility most coverage focuses on is aesthetic. The story of a woman who used to be looked at and no longer is. That story is real, but it is the surface version. The deeper mechanism is role loss. She becomes socially optional not because she aged, but because the caregiving scaffolding that defined her daily indispensability, the school network, the family logistics, the thousands small ways households and workplaces reached for her without thinking, starts to recede. And when it recedes, what remains is a woman who spent decades defining herself through being needed, standing in a room where nobody is reaching. Gail Saltz, writing in Frontiers in Psychology in 2025, describes this as age-related gendered diminishment, a psychological experience of invisibility and inconsequentiality that concentrates specifically in post-midlife women. The biological layer compounds it. A 2024 meta-analysis from University College London found perimenopausal women face roughly a 40% higher risk of depression compared to premenopausal women. Not weakness, not failure to cope, a real biological vulnerability, arriving at the exact moment every external structure of identity is shifting at once. The body keeping score, while everyone, including sometimes her own doctor, mistakes it for mood. And yet the dominant story handed to her for this transition is the one about the bereft mother. Empty nest syndrome. The woman lost without her children. The research largely does not support this picture. A longitudinal study from University of California, Berkeley, tracking women from their 40 seconds into their early 60 seconds, found that marital satisfaction increased as children left home, driven by the quality of time that opened up afterward. For many women, what follows the quiet is not grief. It is the first room of her own in decades. The relief is documented. It is not selfish. It is allowed. But here's what nobody actually says about this generation. And it is what the data kept pointing toward without quite stating directly. The invisibility came for her twice. The first time, it was her labor that was invisible. Running, sustaining, holding, maintaining, all of it unseen. The second time, it is she herself who disappears, just as the labor stops. The timing is not coincidental. She was legible to the world precisely because she was useful. When the function recedes, the visibility recedes with it. The attention was attached to the role. It was never attached to her. This is what the gray divorce data keeps circling. The divorce rate among Americans over 50 doubled between 1,990 and 2010. Most surveys suggest a majority of these divorces are initiated by women. AARP research found most had seen the signs long before they acted. The loneliness inside a full house, the feeling of being present and unmet, the slow and painful understanding that being needed and being known are not the same thing. Researchers at Bowling Green State University found that for women, gray divorce carries a 45% drop in standard of living. The economic cost is real, unequal, and the data does not soften it. She knew that. She left anyway. That is not a woman who ran out of options. That is a woman who decided, at 53, that being seen was worth more than maintaining an arrangement that had stopped seeing her. I'm not going to tell you the second half is easier. The research is too mixed for that, and promising otherwise would be dishonest. What does appear consistently is this. Loneliness peaks in the late 40s and early 50s and tends to ease after. The women who land with the most stability are not the ones who overhauled everything. They are the ones who built a few real anchors. Work that uses who they actually are rather than what they can produce. One relationship that doesn't require performance. A structure that holds the week together on the days when motivation fails entirely. She has been carrying the weight of competence for 30 years without anyone naming it as weight. She has been fined so many times that fine became a resting state, and she quietly lost the capacity to locate where she actually is underneath it. Maybe that's your mother. Maybe that's your friend. Maybe, if you're watching this on a quiet weekday evening, after a day when several people needed things from you, and nobody thought to ask how you were, maybe that's you. The catalog of small erasures is real. The labor nobody logged is real. The disorientation of becoming optional in rooms you held together is real. And so is this. You did not become less. The world stopped paying attention. At the exact moment it had something to learn. That's the world's problem. It will take it a while to figure that out. If this names something you've been carrying, subscribe. Come to the comments. I want to know what nobody said to you.